Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Ethereum, dubious speculation. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. If you are familiar with my channel over the last year and a half, I have maintained my view that Ethereum will ultimately head home. Now, of course, this view has been met with a lot of criticism, especially over the last several months. But really, since 2022 started, back over here, we've talked about the idea that Ethereum would ultimately find itself back home or within the lower fair value regression band. That is my general expectation for Ethereum. Okay? Now, I want to talk about a few things. Clearly, it has not gone there yet, despite the fact that we are about a year and a half out from when 2022 started. So that might lead some to believe that it will never happen. And of course, there's always a chance that it doesn't. We should be open-minded to the idea that any potential outcome could in fact occur. With that said, I do think it's worthwhile to plan for what we consider to be the most likely outcome. And for me, the most likely outcome, at least where I'm planning the most, is for the Ethereum valuation to ultimately make its way back home. Some people also might be under the illusion that these assets only go down during the primary bear market years for Bitcoin, which are 2014, 2018, and 2022. But I will remind you that Ethereum had, in fact, a 75% correction from 2019 until early 2020. For reference, a 75% correction from Ethereum's most recent high would put it at around $500 or so. So I think there is this idea that just because we're in the pre-halving year, it doesn't mean that Ethereum can't have another sizable correction back to the downside to get it back within the lower regression trend, within the lower regression logarithmic, the lower regression trend line, right? There is a chance, of course, that that could happen. Now, one of the things I want to mention is the bounds here on the regression trend line are currently from around 599 up to 1255, with the fair value currently coming in at around 867. Interestingly enough, the fair value is almost where the prior local bottom was. Now, I would say that there is a good chance that Ethereum could take out that low if we do fade the second half of the year in a similar way as we did in 2019. One thing that we've talked about at length is how in the pre-halving years for Bitcoin, what you'll often see is the bulls get wrecked and the bears get wrecked. So, right, you wreck the bears first, you give the bulls the false sense of security that the asset will only go up, and then you spend the second half of the year wrecking the bulls, right? So you wreck the bears and then you wreck the bulls. By the end of the year, both bulls and bears are sufficiently wrecked. That is the general expectation for the pre-halving year. Now, one of the most common retorts that I see are along the lines of people saying things like, well, you know, no one's expecting it to happen, therefore it will happen, right? Like no one's expecting it to go to a new high, therefore it will. Guys, believe me, the same stuff was said in 2019. And by the way, we also had a meme coin rally back then too. And then what happened? The blue chips of the space, mainly Bitcoin back then, arguably Bitcoin and Ethereum today, punished the asset class by going back down. And guess what happened? Those altcoins got absolutely decimated, not only on their USD pairs, but also on their Bitcoin pairs, many of them on their Ethereum pairs as well. Why? Because there's not liquidity. There's not much liquidity in the altcoin market, right? The liquidity from the altcoin market is probably what's keeping Bitcoin and Ethereum propped up at the valuations that they are. But at some point, liquidity dries up. People get tired of getting rugged from all these scams that are out there, and they just leave. And once the liquidity dries up, then what was once holding up the blue chips, that source of liquidity, it has sort of dried up and it can no longer sustain it. And then the asset class as a whole comes back down, right? So altcoins bleed to the blue chips for a while, just like we've seen over in tech stocks. The mega cap tech stocks have been the ones that have been doing the best. At some point, I think you see things roll over and then everything gets crushed. But with Ethereum right now, you know, a 75% correction, just like it got back over here in 2019, 2020, would put it well within the fair value regression trend line. And it might even put it slightly below. I mean, Bitcoin went below it, so there's no guarantee that Ethereum can't do the same thing. Now, you might say, Why does it have to go down 75%? You know, this initial impulsive move by Ethereum back in 2018 was a 95% move, but then this one over here was only like an 82% move. So could there be some element of diminishing losses? You have 95 to 90 or 95 to 82. Therefore, is there a chance that this 75% move is there a chance that the fade that we potentially see in the second half of the year is a tempered version of what we saw back over here? Hey, that's a decent idea, and perhaps we should explore it. We could explore the ratios, right? And we could say you have 95. Everyone loves how I draw the fives, although I contend that it's the right way to draw it. I mean, look, everyone wants to draw their fives like this, right? But if you're writing a five, let's say you're writing a 9, right? And you write the 9 and you end it down here. It makes the most sense to just start the 5 from down here. It's the most efficient way, right? It's not efficient to like write a 9 and then have to come all the way back up here and then write a 5. It's more efficient to do it the other way. So I will stand by that. So you have 95% divided by 75. Man, I get to write 5 a lot. Then equals 82. Over x, right? So what is x? Solve for x. So you basically have 95 divided by 75 equals 82. Equals 82 divided by x. We're just going to solve for x. X is 1230 over 19. We'll get the approximate form. It turns out it's a 64% correction. So let's suppose that it fades it in the same way that it faded it back over here. And you solve for x, and it gives you a 65. Man, I get to write 5 again. You get a 65% correction. Okay? What would a 65% correction do to Ethereum from this high? Well, it would put it at $745. $745 is where a 65% correction would put it, which would in fact be a lower low. And I've contended for a long time that Ethereum could put in a lower low in a potential recession. Guys, this was a recession over here, right? Back in 2020, and the Fed printed immediately. What happens if we get a recession and the Fed does not print immediately, right? That's how I think you could see something like this play out. So a 65% correction would put ETH at a lower low, and it would at least get it close to the fair value. I mean, even if it's like a 60% correction, it could get it back to the prior low and get it back home, okay? So that is what I think is in fact the most likely outcome. Now, we could look at the Ethereum Bitcoin pair, and I know what a lot of you guys are thinking, right? What's it doing at 0.07? And it's basically at 0.07. Well, my thesis here, and it's taking a lot longer than I thought, no doubt about it, right? Receipts are there. I've been saying forever that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation is going to go down. I would rationalize it in my own mind, which again, I know is a somewhat desperate attempt, but I would rationalize it and say, technically, these are lower highs. So technically, has it really been wrong to assume the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation will fade? I don't think so. But also, technically speaking, you could say that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation has been going sideways for the better part of 2 years. One way to visualize this, look at the 50-week SMA. The 50-week has basically just been going sideways at around 0.07. In fact, it is the 50-week that we are testing right now. The same area for the 50-week was where the 50-week moved down back over here in 2018. So I am still under the impression that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation will fade. I'm also under the impression that the Ethereum Bitcoin collapse will likely mark the end of the altcoin reckoning. When you look back at the last cycle, and we sort of draw a trend line across here, what marked the end of the altcoin reckoning? What marked the end of it? Was it this move? No. This was late 2017. Was it this one? No. Wasn't. This marked the bottom for many altcoins on their USD pairs, not all of them, and it marked the bottom for Bitcoin USD, but it did not mark the bottom for it did not mark the end of the altcoin reckoning. The altcoin reckoning really did not stop until the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation finally bottomed way over here. If you were to take a similar type of view this cycle and say that this here is sort of your initial your initial test. I think at some point we're going to get the secondary test. Now remember, this time frame back over here from the first test to the second test, sorry, I got the price. Let me get the time frame here. From test A to test B was what? It was 54 weeks. From this test here, how far out are we? We're at 49 weeks. I put forth the idea that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation is going to be testing these levels in the coming weeks. Okay? 1 or 2 months, I think it could happen. Legitimately, I think the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation could be testing 0.05 within the next month or two. You know, when you think about it, back in May of 2018, when the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation was just chilling at 0.08, 0.09, do you think we were sitting there thinking it was going to be at 0.02 in half a year? No. Okay? This is not a thing, right? Most people did not assume it was going to go to 0.02 back then. In fact, we still had people saying that it was doing relatively well. And it was. Still didn't stop it from collapsing. And it was the Ethereum's Bitcoin valuation secondary collapse, not the first one, that actually marked the low. It marked the low for Bitcoin. Things don't have to play out the same way, but I'm telling you, there are a lot of cyclical components to the cryptoverse, and I do feel somewhat convinced still that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation will bleed back down, and it should mark the sort of the final stages of the altcoin reckoning. So if it follows, you could see it move back down. Perhaps it gets a bounce back up, and then it goes down again. But this move to the downside could come on a Bitcoin rally, not a Bitcoin dump, right? I mean, this move over here was sort of this Ethereum Bitcoin valuation bleed was a Bitcoin rally, not a dump. I mean, part of it is Bitcoin fading, but still, I put forth this idea that the altcoin reckoning could end when the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation finally collapses. So that's still my view. It has been my view, and it will continue to be my view. And I don't see any compelling reason to change it at this point. Someone might say, well, technically it's holding up, and hey, technically you're right. But technically speaking, it's been putting in lower highs since 2021. And technically speaking, it's been putting in lower highs since 2017. Okay? If we're being technically correct, which is, of course, the best way to be correct. The other way to look at this, of course, is the Ethereum Bitcoin market cap. Actually, before we do that, I want to show you one more perspective here on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation, and that's to look at the monthly, the 20-month SMA. This is something we followed a lot back in 2019, 2020, and I just want to mention it. So if you remember, we called for this rally by Ether Bitcoin. We said we'll fall back down at the end of 2020, right? We thought that we would because Bitcoin was going parabolic, and normally Q4 is Bitcoin's time to shine if it's a bull market. We held support at the 20-month. I thought that we were fading it here back a year ago. That's when I thought it was done. I underestimated the strength that it would have going into the merge. Still though, it was a lower high, okay? Now, instead of getting one monthly close below the 20-month, we have had several monthly closes, and perhaps this is the back test of it, just like this was the back test in the bull market. Okay? So this could just be simply the back test of the 20-month before it ultimately fades. Now, what would cause it to fade? One of the reasons I think it could fade is because liquidity from the altcoin market is drying up. So people that maybe were converting their alts to Ethereum, they'll be unable to do that as efficiently because the altcoin market liquidity is just simply drying up. So I would put forth the idea again that this is just a back test potentially of the 20-month. I mean, we did have wicks here, but that it should ultimately fade back down, maybe bounce back up, and then go lower once again. And then the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation could just be seen potentially one of two ways. One way is on a logarithmic regression trend line sort of slope. These are just curves that I'm drawing just for convenience, right? One way to look at it is like that. And then the other way is an oscillator, which there is a chance. I mean, there's a chance that it could just be some type of oscillator, and this is sort of just the initial capitalization, okay? So the other way to look at this, of course, is to just look at the Ethereum market cap divided by the Bitcoin market cap. And what do you notice here, right? To me, it seems like an oscillator. We don't have the data on the market cap going back to 2015, but you can imagine it was down here before the Ethereum valuation took off. It came up, it came down, it came back up. I think we are likely going to go back down. If you look at the bull market support band on the Ethereum Bitcoin market cap, you can see we're slightly above it right now, although we still have some time here before before the week is over, and you can sometimes get these brief fake outs just to get everyone excited, only for it to just eventually be another lower high, right? So when you think about the Ethereum valuation, one of the reasons I think that the Bitcoin dominance has not broken 49% is because the Ethereum valuation against Bitcoin has not taken the plunge. But I've said before, I think in the end, even the giants will fall. Even the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation, I do think, will eventually fall. With that said, it has been holding up somewhat admirably. And if you look at things like the Bitcoin and the Ethereum dominance combined, they continue to look relatively healthy. I would say that there's a good chance that Ethereum I do think Ethereum has more or less cemented itself as a blue chip, but that doesn't mean that it can't collapse against Bitcoin. Okay. I do still think that is in fact the most likely outcome. One of the things we talked about before, again, is sort of fading this area here. If you go and look at, say, the ROI of Ethereum after cycle peak, you'll see, and we did a video on it at the time, right? We talked about how in 2019, the Ethereum USD sort of rally in 2019 peaked on day 529 from the peak. This one here peaked at around 524, and ever since then, it's just been slowly fading. So we could just continue to slowly fade what we saw last cycle until we come all the way back down, and then we go up after we get through this recession scare and these macro headwinds, after the altcoin reckoning is over, and so on and so forth. But at this point, I don't think that we can get out of this without fading this rally and coming back down and sort of retesting some of those levels and potentially even going to a new low. I do think that there's reason to be concerned about that, especially considering how quickly the economy is slowing down. I also see liquidity is drying up as well. You can see it in the Cryptoverse. And the other thing to look at is how, and we've talked about this in some of the other videos as well, is how Total 3 has been it kind of tells you where the market is going, right? So is liquidity coming into the Cryptoverse supporting the bull run, or is it not? Okay. And you can see, again, in 2020, Total 3 was above the 20-week. But in 2019, Total 3 fell below it in July. Bitcoin fell below its 20-week over here in September, while it was holding it in 2020. So you could argue that Total 3 is giving us the warning signs that Bitcoin USD could, in fact, fall below its bull market support band. And if it does do that, then I believe 9 out of 9 times from weekly close below the 20-week to weekly close above by Bitcoin, the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation has more or less bled or been somewhat even or equal, but usually it bleeds. So I do think that if you start to get these weekly closes below the 20-week SMA for Bitcoin, then you'll likely see something very similar play out for Ethereum, where it would likely get these weekly closes below. And normally once Bitcoin falls below, Ethereum tends to move a lot quicker to the downside than Bitcoin does. You might argue that Ethereum held up better in the bear market, but that's not true, actually. This might have been a higher low, but you also need to remember that this first low was 82% down, whereas Bitcoin's, even its November low from its high, was only 77% down. So far, Ethereum has not held up better than Bitcoin, although a lot of people would have you believe that it has because they'll look at the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation. But I have to ask you, right? If Ethereum has been holding up so well against Bitcoin, then please try to explain why is the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation unable to put in new highs? Okay, why? If it's holding up better. It's an illusion, right? It's not holding up better. It just, the moves to the downside are so quick that then you spend, a month or two slightly going back up, and it makes you think that the asset, that this asset pair only goes up. But in reality, it's just that the down portions are so quick that, the emotions tied to that downward move are fleeting. And then you spend the next 1 or 2 months going up, everyone gets excited only for it to be another lower high. And then what happens, right? It just fades back to the downside once again. And then everyone gets bearish, and then it goes back up, and then everyone gets bullish again. It just ends up being a lower high, and then it goes down and puts in a new low. So I don't see it being any different. I do think that the Ethereum dominance has been impressive, to say the least. Okay, so to give credit where credit is due, If we just pull up the Ethereum dominance, if I can find it on here, you can see that it's currently near 21%. So the Ethereum dominance has been doing quite well. And I'm not trying to take that away from it. I mean, you can look at a lot of these altcoins, and guess what? They're just bleeding on their Ether pairs. I mean, like ADA Ether has just been bleeding for a long time. Aave Ether, bleeding. AVAX Ether, bleeding. Dot Ether, bleeding. BNB Ether, going down. Link Ether, horrendous. And so on and so forth. Okay? The altcoin market is bleeding to Ethereum. That's true. But Ethereum is bleeding to Bitcoin. All right? It is. I mean, maybe not today, maybe not last week or last month, but since 2021, it is in fact lower highs. And I would put forth the idea too that if it gets rejected once again and comes back down to these June lows from last year, then you really have to start to question, how is Ethereum outperforming Bitcoin if the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation is just sort of slowly trending down? I feel like it's going down slow enough to make people think that it's not going down, if that makes sense. But it doesn't change the fact that it's going down. Okay. So that's my general outlook. There's a chance I'm wrong, so we have to admit that. You know, they say if you're in a room and you're sitting at a table and you don't know who the schmuck is, that means you're the schmuck. It's possible that I'm the schmuck in this case. Okay, it's possible. We have to admit that. Or there's a possibility that I get this one wrong. It sort of seems like the rest of the market has been behaving how we thought it would. I mean, the altcoin market seems to be collectively bleeding back to Bitcoin, whether Bitcoin goes up or down, and the Bitcoin dominance slowly breaks higher. Once the Ethereum Bitcoin, if the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation breaks down, which I think it will, I think that will mark the final phase of this move, right? I think the dominance of Bitcoin will finally break out, and then you will see the penultimate stage of the altcoin reckoning. All right, that's my view on the market, and it has been for quite some time. I do hope that many of you have been able to take some cold showers for the last 16 months, avoid the altcoin market, because the altcoin market has not done really much of anything other than just slowly bleed. And every single time we get a rally, everyone comes out to sort of talk about how great altcoins are. But look at these altcoin rallies. They're all basically just like 40% rallies. Every single one of them, okay? And every single time, everyone gets so excited about them, and they're just nothing more than another 40% rally off the low. So please be careful with the altcoin market. Bitcoin and Ethereum are your blue chips. Alts bleed to ETH. I think ETH bleeds to Bitcoin. At some point, you could see everything come back down, and the thing to look for is, do the altcoins hold against their Bitcoin pairs? Once that happens, I don't think we're at that stage yet right now. I just think we're at the stage where altcoins bleed back to Bitcoin, and they keep the valuations of some of these blue chips propped up for as long as they can. But at some point, that liquidity dries up. I think it'll dry up in Ethereum before it dries up in Bitcoin. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe. Check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. We are running the sale still, so make sure you check that out. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.